Marjorie Ellis woke before sunrise in her quiet country home. She moved with calm steps through the dark hallway, careful not to wake her husband. In the kitchen, she poured a glass of water and breathed deeply, thinking of the day ahead. She wanted to see her stores in person, but she did not want to draw any attention. As a billionaire business owner, she knew her face was well known in the press. Today, she would be just another customer. After a quick shower and simple clothes, plain white blouse, dark jeans, and comfortable flats, Marjorie gathered her long hair into a loose ponytail. She slipped on a pair of sunglasses and a low baseball cap. She tucked her wallet and phone into an inside pocket of her light jacket. With one last look in the mirror, she nodded to herself and whispered, "I can do this." Then she drove away, feeling the thrill of being unknown. The neighborhood convenience store sat at a busy corner of a small town. Its bright glass windows reflected the early morning light. The sign above read Ellis's General Store. Most people called it just Ellis's. Marjorie had bought the chain 2 years earlier. When she saw the family business struggling, she had promised to keep prices fair and treat every customer with respect. Today she wanted to check if her promise was kept. When she pulled into the small parking lot, the sun was rising over red brick buildings across the street. A few cars were already there. Marjorie parked her silver sedan and stepped onto the cracked sidewalk. She felt the soft warmth of the sun on her face and the faint smell of fresh coffee drifting from the store's doorway. She took a slow breath, enjoying the simple comforts of morning. She pushed open the glass door and stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed softly, but the store manager, Kyle Dawson, did not look up. He stood behind the counter with his elbows resting on the worn wood surface. His phone lay open in his hand, and his eyes were fixed on the bright screen. Kyle was young, probably in his early 20s. He had worked here since he was 17 and thought he knew everyone who walked through the door. He took pride in running a smooth shift, but today he seemed distracted. Marjorie moved down the first aisle. The shelves were neat with rows of chips and crackers. She picked up a bag of gourmet popcorn, one of her favorite snacks, and turned it over in her hands. She glanced at the price tag. It was fair, just as she had directed her managers to keep them. She smiled to herself. Even small details mattered. She looked at the dates on the cans of soup, checked the freshness of the fruit, and ran her fingers along the smooth labels of the tea boxes. Everything was in order. A few feet away, an older woman in a red dress selected a loaf of bread. Child tugged at her sleeve, pointing excitedly at colorful candy near the checkout. Marjorie watched them, feeling a sense of pride. This was why she had bought the stores. She wanted families people like her to find good products at good prices without any trouble. Then Marjorie stepped into the next aisle. There she saw a display of high-end health bars she had recently added. The sign read, "Try our new protein bars, only $2.49. Marjorie reached out to pick one up, just to feel the packaging. As her fingers touched the smooth plastic wrapper, she heard the whir of footsteps behind her. She turned and saw a security camera in the corner, blinking red to show it was recording. She nodded at it, as if to greet an old friend. Meanwhile, Kyle glanced up from his phone and noticed movement near the checkout. He frowned and tapped the screen to silence a notification, rubbed his eyes and tried to think. He'd like to keep the store safe, and he remembered hearing a story about someone shoplifting a similar health bar last week. He decided to watch. Marjorie pushed her cat back a little and moved toward the counter, the bar still in her hand. She rehearsed in her mind what she would say if someone greeted her. She thought about mentioning her visit to a few employees, praising their work, maybe offering to buy a round of coffee for the morning crew, but nothing was said yet. As she approached the counter, Kyle's eyes narrowed. He saw Marjorie's hand holding the bar and thought she was about to walk out without paying. His pulse quickened. He stood up straighter and crossed his arms. The energy of the small store pressed in around them, bright lights overhead, the quiet hum of the air conditioner, the soft ticking of the wall clock. Marjorie placed the bar gently on the counter and reached into her jacket pocket for her wallet. She moved slowly, not wanting to rush or seem threatening. She looked up at Kyle with a friendly smile peeking from beneath her cap, intended to say good morning, but Kyle spoke first. "Hey," he said, his voice sharp. "Are you going to pay for that, or just leave it here?" He tapped the bar with his finger. Marjorie's chest tightened. She saw the suspicion in his eyes. She moved her hand faster to pull out her wallet. "Yes, of course," she answered in a calm voice. Her words were clear, but gentle. She unzipped the small pocket and pulled out a credit card. She noticed a few staff members whispering among themselves behind her. A young cashier looked on, nervously, standing ready to help. Kyle pointed at the card and then at Marjorie's hands. "I want to see some ID too," he said. Marjorie's smile faded. She felt a flash of hurt at the demand. She had faced worse things in her life, but right now, she wanted kindness, not suspicion. She opened her wallet and showed her driver's license first, then her credit card. Kyle studied the card and then her face for a long moment. He seemed confused. He flipped the card over and read the name. He blinked and brought his finger to his lips. "Alice," he whispered. Marjorie nodded. Her heart pounded, but she did not speak. She placed both her card and license on the counter. Kyle picked up the license and examined it again. He saw her photo, her name, and the address. He swallowed hard. The store was now quiet except for the low buzz of the fluorescent lights. Other customers stopped shopping and watched the two of them. Marjorie waited. She stood straight and calm, her arms at her sides. She did not look angry, only firm. She respected Kyle's job, but she wanted to remind him gently that respect must go both ways. Kyle's cheeks turned pink. He moved his hand away and stepped back. He looked at her and then at the license. He could not believe what he saw. He felt a rush of shame for judging her without knowing her. Marjorie reached out with one hand and picked up her card and license. She moved them back into her wallet. Kyle swallowed, his voice soft. "I'm sorry," he said, his eyes downcast. Marjorie shook her head gently. "I know you did not know," she said. "It is okay." She handed him the popcorn and the health bar. "Thank you," she added, and then she turned and walked toward the door. Marjorie stepped out into the bright morning sun, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. She knew there was work to do, but she also knew her stores could change. The way people treated each other. As she walked to her car, she lifted her head and breathed in the fresh air, ready for what came next. Marjorie Ellis stepped back inside the store after her quiet morning visit. She drove away feeling hopeful that her simple check had gone well. A few hours later, she returned in the early afternoon, without her cap and sunglasses this time. She wore a soft blue sweater and dark slacks. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She wanted to see how the staff treated each other when the store was busy. She slipped in through the same glass door, and the bell tinkled over her head. Inside, the store was brighter now. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, and the aisles were busier. A young mother was pushing a cart with a toddler inside. A man in a blue polo shirt scanned items at the self-checkout station. A delivery driver stood near the back, checking boxes on a clipboard. Kyle Dawson sat behind the counter again, but this time he watched over the store's entrance. He saw every customer who came in and left. His phone was pocketed, and his expression was more serious than sleepy. Marjorie walked slowly down the snack aisle. She admired the new display of imported chocolates she had added last month. She noticed that one box was slightly out of line. She gently straightened it, then reached for a small box of dark chocolate truffles. She held them in her hand, feeling the weight of the box and the smooth texture of the wrapper. She smiled to herself, thinking of the rich taste she enjoyed. At home, as she moved to the next aisle, she saw the mother and toddler walking toward the checkout. The little girl pointed at a pack of fruit gummies near the floor-level shelf. The mother crouched down, lifted her daughter onto her hip, and picked up the gummies. Marjorie paused and watched the small, sweet moment. She thought of her own grandchildren, now grown. She felt a gentle warmth in her heart. Marjorie then turned toward the refrigerated section. She had ordered fresh organic juices to be delivered that morning. She checked the dates on the bottles and saw they were correctly labeled. She nodded with approval, but decided not to draw attention by pointing it out. She wanted the employees to feel trusted and competent. She started back toward the snack area when she noticed that the display of high-end protein bars had changed. It now had signs saying buy two, get one free. Curious, she reached out to read the small print. Her fingers brushed the wrapper of a new flavor of coconut almond bar. She lifted it off the shelf to look more closely at the ingredients. The packaging design was clean and modern, just as she had requested. At that moment, Kyle's voice rang out behind her. Marjorie turned and saw him striding down the aisle toward her. His face was tight with concern. He held his hands out slightly in front of him, as if he wanted to stop her when she stepped closer. Marjorie felt a sudden shiver of unease. "Ma'am," Kyle said, his voice low but firm. "Are you planning to pay for that bar?" He pointed at the one in her hand. Marjorie looked at him puzzled. She smiled and raised her left hand to show him her empty right. "Of course," she said softly. "I'm just checking the label. I'll pay for it, just let me put it in my basket." She lifted her reusable canvas bag from her shoulder and held it open. Kyle frowned. He stepped closer and fixed her with a sharp stare. Marjorie blinked, surprised by his intensity. She set the bar gently on the edge of the shelf, as if to prove she did not intend to leave with it. She reached into her bag for her small wallet, but Kyle did not wait. He grabbed her right arm with one hand. Marjorie gasped at the sudden grip. It felt tight and almost painful. Her heart thumped in her chest. "Hold on," Kyle said. "I saw you pick it up. I need you to pay first." He tightened his grip, and Marjorie winced. Marjorie opened her mouth to speak, but Kyle would not let go. Looked around as though he needed an answer quickly. Behind him, 2 other employees had stopped their work. The cashier at the register froze, and the stock clerk with the delivery boxes watched. From the back, the mother and child at self-checkout turned to stare. The hush in the store felt heavy. Marjorie's voice trembled with shock. "Please," she whispered, "let me put it in my bag and pay." She reached for her wallet with her free hand, but Kyle's grip prevented her in his mind. Kyle thought of last week's shoplifting incident, the one where the young man sprinted out of the store with an expensive energy drink. He told himself he was doing his job by stopping a possible thief before she got away. He did not know who Marjorie Ellis was. All he saw in that moment was someone he thought was stealing. Marjorie pulled back slightly. Her feet shuffled on the cool tile floor. She felt embarrassed and frightened. "You're hurting my arm," she said softly, her eyes filling with tears. "Please let me go." Kyle felt a sudden rush of guilt, but did not release her. "I'm sorry," he stammered. "I have to do this." He glanced toward the front entrance, making sure no one else would interrupt. He lifted his free hand and, in a moment of frustration, slapped Marjorie's face. The sound echoed in the quiet store, a firm, sharp smack. Marjorie's head snapped. To the side, she put a hand to her cheek, where she felt a sudden sting. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She took a step backward, and her bag slipped from her shoulder. The protein bar fell to the floor with a soft thud. A few of the nearby customers gasped. Time seemed to slow. The mother bolted across the aisle to help her. The child started to cry. The stock clerk set down a box and hurried forward. The cashier left the register and walked toward Kyle. Everyone froze, as though waiting for the next moment. Kyle stared at his hand, his eyes wide with horror. He could not believe he had done that. He had lost control. Looked at Marjorie, who stood trembling. Her cheeks were wet with tears, and her eyes were red. The anger that had driven him a moment ago drained away, leaving only shame. Marjorie blinked back tears. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She looked at Kyle with quiet pain. "Why did you do that?" she asked in a small voice. "Why'd you think I was a thief?" Kyle's voice cracked. I thought you were stealing," he said, his face pale. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His arms fell to his sides. He looked around at the witnesses, then back at Marjorie. The mother knelt beside Marjorie, offering her a tissue. "You okay?" she asked gently. Marjorie took the tissue and dabbed at her cheek. The store manager, Kyle, took a trembling step forward. He brushed a lock of hair from Marjorie's forehead. Please forgive me, he whispered. Tears ran down his face. I shouldn't have grabbed you. I shouldn't have slapped you. He sank into a low crouch, the same height as Marjorie. Marjorie looked at Kyle's tearful face. She saw fear, shame, and regret in his eyes. She felt her own heart soften. She remembered the early days of her business, when employees made mistakes but learned from them. She remembered her promise to treat people with respect and kindness. Marjorie took another steadying breath. She placed a gentle hand on Kyle's shoulder. I know you were doing your job, she said softly, but you owe everyone respect. She straightened up and lifted her chin. We all deserve respect. The mother guided Marjorie to a nearby bench by the window. The child sat in the mother's lap, watching quietly. Kyle stood behind them, trembling. The store grew hushed as everyone waited. Marjorie closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the pain in her cheek and the heartbeat in her chest. She thought of all the times she had stood up for fairness and dignity. In her business? Then she opened her eyes and spoke again. I will tell the board about this, she said quietly. You will have a chance to explain yourself, and we will set things right. Her voice was calm but firm.
Ow.
This store should be a place of trust, not fear. Kyle nodded, tears shining on his cheeks. The mother squeezed her daughter's hand gently. Marjorie wiped the last tear from her own cheek and stood up. She faced Kyle and the small gathering of employees and customers. She held out her hand to Kyle. He hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took it. The two stood together in the aisle. Around them, the store felt softer somehow. Marjorie's quiet strength and Kyle's regret had changed the mood. Marjorie retrieved the protein bar and the truffle box. She placed them on a small shelf behind the counter. I'll pay later, she said with a small smile. Then she turned and walked toward the door, with the mother and child following at a respectful distance. Outside, Marjorie paused on the sidewalk. She pressed a hand to her cheek, feeling the tender spot left by the slap. She took a deep breath of fresh air and felt the sun warm her face. She stood tall and straightened her sweater. She knew the next steps would not be easy, but she also knew her store could heal and grow stronger. Marjorie looked back at the door and saw Kyle watching from inside. His head was bowed, but she saw a flicker of hope in his posture. She raised her hand in a small wave. Then she turned and walked to her car, ready to face the work ahead with courage and compassion. Marjorie stood perfectly still, her breathing slow, as Kyle Dawson blinked at the sight of her hand holding the thin plastic card. The store was hushed now, the sudden storm of noise after the slap replaced by a strange, heavy silence. Every eye in the small store watched her. She did not rush. She took a quiet breath and reached into her purse, which hung at her side, and carefully pulled out her business card. The glossy card read Marjorie Ellis, CEO and owner, Ellis Retail. Group in small, elegant letters. Kyle's mouth fell open. His hand trembled as he reached for it. For the first time, he saw the full weight of what he had done. He had struck the woman who owned every store in the chain. Marjorie held out the card, her arms steady, her eyes calm but firm. Kyle's jaw dropped as he took it with a shaking hand. He stared down at the name and logo, then looked up at her face, still faintly pink from the slap. A murmur rippled through the store. The mother who had helped Marjorie earlier gently guided her child out of the way. The child stared up at Marjorie with wide, curious eyes. The cashier and stock clerk exchanged worried glances. Kyle read the card again, his face growing whiter with each look. He cleared his throat, unable to speak at first. Marjorie saw the fear in his eyes, fear of the board, fear of his own mistake, fear of the unknown. At last, Kyle croaked. I don't know what to say. His voice broke. Marjorie placed a gentle hand on his arm. The touch was light, but it carried the strength of her position. You know the company's values, she said softly. Respect, fairness, kindness. Everyone who walks through our doors deserves those things. Her voice was quiet, but it echoed in the hush of the store. Kyle swallowed hard. He looked around at the small group of witnesses, employees and customers alike, and then back. At Marjorie, He felt exposed, unmasked. He had acted on impulse and anger, without knowing who she was. He bowed his head. "I lost control," he said. "I'm so sorry." His apology sounded small compared to the weight of his actions, but it was sincere. Marjorie nodded. She reached out and took back her card. The gesture was simple, but it shifted the power back into her hands. She slid card and purse back into her jacket and opened her mouth to speak again. "We will address this," she said. "I will speak with my executive team. You will have the chance to explain yourself, and we will work through this." Her voice remained calm, giving Kyle a chance to face what came next. The cashier stepped forward and cleared her throat. "Store policy says we must report any incident like this to corporate," she said quietly. Kyle's face twisted with shame. He managed a weak nod. Marjorie turned to the cashier. "Yes," she said. "Document this fully and send it up right away. Include the names of everyone who witnessed what happened." She looked back at Kyle. "Thank you for cooperating." Kyle swallowed again. He mouthed a silent sorry and turned to the small group. His shoulders sagged under the weight of his mistake. The employees watched him with a mix of sympathy and relief. No one wanted their manager to lose his job. Many had worked with him for years, but they also trusted Marjorie's judgment. She had always been fair. Marjorie stepped toward the register and picked up the protein bar and the box of truffles that lay there. She placed them neatly into her reusable bag. She smiled gently at the cashier and handed over a few bills. "Keep the change," she said. The cashier managed a small smile in return. Marjorie turned and walked past Kyle, nodding once in a formal goodbye. Outside, the sun streamed onto the sidewalk. A few birds chirped in a nearby tree, a quiet contrast to the tension inside. Marjorie paused on the pavement, feeling the warmth of the day on her cheek. She lifted her hand to the small, sweet ache left by the slap. She closed her eyes for a moment and remembered her promise to make every store a place of dignity for customers and staff alike. She drove back to her corporate office in the city, her thoughts focused and clear. She had made a plan already in her mind. First, she would call an emergency board meeting. She would ask for full transparency, for training updates, for a public apology on behalf of Ellis Retail Group. She would show that respect was not just a word, but a guiding principle. At her office, the polished lobby greeted her as usual. The receptionist gave her a curious look, her eyes following Marjorie's gentle limp to one side. Marjorie returned the look with a soft smile. "I'm fine," she whispered as she passed. "Let's get to work." The receptionist nodded and buzzed the boardroom door open. Inside the boardroom, her fellow executives rose as she entered. The long table held cups of coffee, notebooks, and tablets. The soft hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. Marjorie took her place at the head of the table, her face composed but resolute. She tapped on her tablet, and the screen displayed. The store's live feed the moment of the incident paused on a still image. Her second-in-command swallowed before speaking. "Marjorie, we've reviewed the footage. The store manager acted without verification. He's deeply sorry. He's ready to face the consequences." Marjorie nodded. She waited for the others to speak, to share their thoughts. The room was respectful, but they needed her direction. She cleared her throat. "This cannot happen again," she said. "We must strengthen our training, reinforce our values, and ensure every employee understands that every customer is a person worthy of respect. We will issue a public statement apologizing to Ms. Ellis for any distress, though we all know the truth now. We'll invite the community to join us in a fundraiser for local anti-discrimination efforts." The board members exchanged glances and then nodded in unison. A fresh sense of purpose filled the room. They drafted a plan. Manager retraining, new signage in stores, community outreach events. They set a date for a public forum at the local community center where Marjorie herself would speak. Meanwhile, Kyle sat in a small back office waiting for someone to call his name. He watched the clock tick slowly. Each second felt heavy. He thought of his mistake, the shame, the pain he caused. He rehearsed his apology in his mind. He knew he would have to start from scratch to earn back trust. When the executive assistant knocked and said, "Mr. Dawson, they're ready for..." "You," Kyle stood. His legs felt weak. smoothed his shirt, and straightened his back. He walked down the corridor to the boardroom doors. He paused, took a breath, and stepped inside. Marjorie looked up and offered him a small nod. Kyle stepped forward and closed the door behind him, bowed his head. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice steady. "I understand I broke the trust of our company and our customers. I want to make it right." Marjorie watched him with kind eyes. "Thank you, Kyle," she said. "That is the first step. Let's talk about how you can help us lead the change we need." Around them, the boardroom hummed with the quiet determination to turn a painful mistake into an opportunity for growth. And in that moment, both manager and owner found a shared goal: to build a store chain rooted in respect, understanding, and hope. Marjorie sat at her desk the next morning, watching as emails poured in. Reporters thanked her for speaking out. Community leaders praised the plan for anti-discrimination events. Even customers sent messages of support. She leaned back in her chair and took a deep breath. The night before, she and her board had stayed late drafting the public apology and planning training sessions for every store. Now that work was real. Across town, Kyle Dawson walked into his small training room at the Ellis Retail Group headquarters. His chest felt tight, but he stood tall. Today he would join other managers to learn new ways of leading with respect. He wore a clean white shirt and dark slacks. His name tag read Kyle Dawson, store manager. He held a notepad and pen, ready to listen. In the training room, about 20 managers from different stores sat in neat rows. A facilitator at the front welcomed them. She began by showing the video clip of last week's incident. The room was silent, and Kyle closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the weight of what had happened and realized how important it was to learn better. The facilitator spoke calmly. She talked about the company's core values: respect, fairness, kindness. She explained new guidelines for handling suspected theft. Now, employees must ask politely for a receipt before making any move. They must alert a supervisor rather than act alone. They must keep calm, even if they feel angry or scared. Kyle raised his hand. His voice shook slightly when he spoke. "I want to say I'm sorry again," he said. "I know I failed. I want to learn how to do better." The facilitator nodded. She smiled gently. "That is what this training is for. We learn together so we can lead better." Meanwhile, Marjorie drove back to the hometown store. She wanted to see the changes in action. She parked in the spot near the door and took a moment to steady herself. The memories of the slap still stung, but she felt hopeful. She walked inside and felt a warm breeze of new energy. Behind the counter, a fresh sign read, "You are welcome here always." Bright posters reminded employees of the new respect guidelines. A small brochure stand offered information on community events. Marjorie nodded with approval. She moved toward the snack aisle, where a young employee named Sarah arranged chips on the shelf. Sarah looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Ms. Ellis," she said cheerfully. Marjorie smiled back. "Good morning, Sarah," she replied. "How are things today?" Sarah beamed. "Much better," she said. "We had a meeting this morning about respect and kindness. It felt good to talk about it." Marjorie walked on, passing the refrigerated section. She noticed a new area by the window with chairs and a small table. A sign on the table invited customers to write suggestions or share stories. Marjorie sank into one of the chairs and picked up the suggestion card nearest her. It read, "Thank you for making this store a safe place." She smiled softly. At the counter, Kyle greeted a family. He spoke with a calm, friendly tone. He offered them a small sample of the new protein bar. The little boy laughed and took one. Marjorie watched from the aisle. She felt pride well up in her chest. She remembered the tense moment when Kyle had grabbed her arm. Now she saw a different man, one who had learned and grown. A customer approached the counter. She was an older woman who had been in the store the day of the incident. Her eyes were kind but firm. "Miss Ellis," she said, "I want to thank you for standing up for respect." Marjorie nodded. "Thank you," she said softly. "I want this store to be a place where everyone feels safe." The woman reached out and took Marjorie's hand. "You are doing great work." Marjorie felt tears at the corners of her eyes. She stepped aside and the woman walked away. She turned back to see Kyle watching her. He gave a small nod. Marjorie nodded back. They shared a moment of understanding, of healing, and hope. Later that afternoon, Marjorie held a small gathering in the store's back room. She had invited local leaders, customers, and staff. A simple table held water, coffee, and pastries. The atmosphere was calm. People chatted quietly, sharing their thoughts. Marjorie stood at the front. She cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "This store is part of our community. It is more than a place to buy groceries. It is where neighbors meet, families shop, and lives intersect. We had a painful moment here. We all felt it. But we also saw an opportunity to grow and learn." She paused and looked around the room. She continued, "I want to apologize again for any fear or hurt this store caused. I promise you we will do better. We are starting new training, new policies, and community events. We will work with local schools on kindness projects. We will partner with anti-discrimination groups to hold forums right here. We will keep listening to you." The room filled with applause. Several hands went up. A teacher from the local college spoke. She praised the plan and offered her students help in creating a mural on the store's sidewall, celebrating unity. A church leader offered to host a food drive in the store's parking lot. After the meeting, Marjorie stepped outside. She felt a tap on her shoulder. It was Sarah, the young employee. "Ms. Ellis," she said softly, "thank you for giving us a chance to be part of the change." Marjorie knelt to be at Sarah's level. "Thank you, Sarah, for your hard work." She hugged her lightly. As the sun set, light from the store's windows spilled onto the sidewalk. Marjorie stood alone for a moment, watching the store hum with new life. She thought of her first morning visit when she wore the cap and sunglasses. She smiled at how far they had come together in just a few days. That night, Marjorie sat at her writing desk at home. She opened her laptop and typed a short journal entry. "Today the store felt like a true home for our community. We faced a mistake. We owned it. We are growing stronger together." She saved the entry and closed her computer. Before bed, she called her husband. "I visited the store today," she said. "You would be proud." He laughed softly and said, "I know I would." She smiled and ended the call. As she lay in bed, Marjorie thought about tomorrow. She planned to visit another store in a neighboring town. She knew her work was not done. She knew challenges lay ahead, but she felt a firm hope in her heart. She had seen kindness replace fear. She had seen respect grow from a painful moment. She believed this was only the beginning of something better for her stores and for her community. Marjorie slipped into the store early the next morning before the usual rush. The bell over the door chimed softly as she entered. She paused for a moment, breathing in the familiar scent of fresh coffee and warm pastries. The store looked bright and welcoming. New banners above each "I'll read, everyone belongs here." The shelves were neat, and small vases of fresh flowers stood on the counter and a corner table. She moved down the snack aisle and spotted Sarah arranging chips. Sarah looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Ms. Ellis," she said, her voice warm. Marjorie smiled back. "Good morning, Sarah. Everything looks wonderful." As she spoke, she noticed how confidently Sarah spoke to each customer, guiding them with polite questions. Marjorie felt a surge of pride at how the staff had absorbed the new respect guidelines. Marjorie picked up a loaf of whole grain bread to check the freshness. The tag showed it had been baked that morning, just as she had planned with the local bakery. She nodded and set the loaf in her basket. She moved on to the refrigerated section and reached for a bottle of organic juice. She read the label carefully and smiled when she saw the new Community Choice Tag program, where customers could vote each month on a product to feature at a discount. A group of high school students entered, chatting quietly. They wore jerseys of the local football team. One of them noticed Marjorie and waved. Marjorie waved back and felt a gentle warmth. These students had helped paint the mural on the store's sidewall last week. The mural showed people of different ages and backgrounds holding hands around the globe. It was bright and simple, matching Marjorie's vision of unity. Marjorie walked toward the front of the store. Parts of the mural were visible through the front window. She paused to admire the children's painted faces smiling at passersby. She thought about how a painful moment had led to this celebration of community. A busboy from a nearby cafe had painted the flowers. An elderly artist had added the final outline. Everyone had joined in. She approached the counter. Kyle Dawson spotted her first. He straightened his posture and tucked his hair behind his ear. He had been nervous about this morning, but when he saw her gentle smile, he felt relief. Marjorie placed her basket on the counter. "Hello, Kyle," she said quietly. Kyle's hands moved smoothly as he scanned her items. "Good morning, Ms. Ellis," he replied. "How are you today?" "I'm very well, thank you," she answered. "I wanted to see how the store feels on a regular morning." She watched him as he greeted the next customer, a man in a suit who ordered a coffee and paid with a friendly nod. Kyle walked him to the machine, offered a sample of the new protein bar, and joked gently with him about its flavor. The man laughed and thanked him. Kyle returned to Marjorie's side and finished her sale. He looked at her with steady eyes.
"Thank you for
"Checking in," he said. "I feel more confident now. The training made a real difference." Marjorie reached out and placed a hand on his arm. "I see it," she said softly. "I'm proud of you and the team." After paying, Marjorie gathered her basket and moved toward the little seating area by the window. She sat at a small round table with her coffee and bread. A community suggestion box sat next to her, filled with cards. She opened the box and pulled out the top card. It read, "I love the store. Now it feels like more than a store, it feels like home." She tucked it into her purse, knowing she would share it later at the board meeting. From her seat, she could watch the store. A young man in a wheelchair rolled in with his mother. An older couple shelved a few items on display. A teacher and her students browsed the snack aisle, whispering excitedly about the mural they had painted. Marjorie smiled quietly to herself. She thought of how each of these people had once feared being judged or ignored. Now they felt seen and heard. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. Community forum today at 4 p.m. She glanced at the clock on the wall behind the counter, 10:15. There was still time. She finished her coffee and bread, then rose and headed for the door. As she passed Kyle, he gave her a small nod and thumbs up. She returned the gesture and left the store, stepping into the soft morning light. Outside, the mural glowed in the sun. Marjorie touched the painted flowers and ran her fingers over the bright colors. A neighbor who lived in the apartment above the store smiled and waved through the window. Marjorie waved back, feeling a deep sense of connection. That afternoon, Marjorie returned for the community forum. The parking lot filled quickly with chairs and a small stage. Lights and a microphone were set up. A banner read Ellis Retail Group Community Forum. People of all ages gathered, parents, students, seniors, and local leaders. Kyle stood to one side, greeting each guest with a handshake or a polite nod. The forum began with the mayor speaking, praised the company's response, and announced a joint project, a weekly free reading hour for children in the store's back room. Marjorie listened with a smile, thinking of how many wishes had come true since the incident. When her turn came, Marjorie climbed the small steps onto the stage. She looked out at the faces before her. She felt calm and strong. She opened her speech. "Thank you all for coming. Today we gather not only as customers and staff, but as neighbors and friends." Her voice was steady. She spoke of the apology, the training, the mural, and the new programs. She spoke of the importance of respect in every moment, whether a customer picks up a snack or a manager greets a stranger. She finished by inviting everyone to share ideas and stories. Hands shot up. A teacher suggested a weekly cooking class for seniors. A teenager offered to start a book club in the store's reading corner. A small business owner proposed a local product fair once a month. Marjorie wrote down each suggestion, promising to make as many real as possible. The forum ended with applause and chatter. People lingered, enjoying snacks and coffee. Kyle approached Marjorie, a small stack of suggestion cards in his hand. "Here are some ideas from the forum," he said. "I can start organizing them next week." Marjorie nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Kyle," she said. "Let's make these happen." As the forum wound down, Marjorie noticed the young man who had joined his mother earlier, smiled and said, "Ms. Ellis, thank you for creating this reading hour. I want to help with it." Marjorie's eyes warmed. "That would be wonderful," she said. "I'll contact you with the details." The young man beamed. Later that evening, after the forum, Marjorie returned home. She sat at her desk and wrote in her journal, "Today I saw community grow. I saw ideas become plans, saw respect become action." She saved the entry and closed her laptop. She called her husband, telling him about the day's successes and the people she had met. He listened with pride and said, "You've done something incredible." Marjorie smiled, feeling content. That night, she dreamed of the mural, the smiling faces, and the busy store. She felt a gentle satisfaction that from a moment of harm had come a much greater good. She knew the journey was not over, but she also knew that with respect, kindness, and community, her stores would always be places where everyone belonged.